The number of doctors in this country has dropped to a record new low. I'm not quite sure exactly what the numbers are, but apparently we are now suffering from a fairly chronic shortage of doctors and GPs. Let's talk to GP and the producer of the great NHS heist, Dr. Bob Gill. Good afternoon, Bob.
Good afternoon, Kevin.
Do you have any idea? I mean, what kind of numbers are we talking about? How many doctors do we have?
Well, we know we're approximately 5,000 short of the number of GPs that we need to stand still. But it shouldn't surprise anybody. We've had a decade of austerity in the NHS. We've lost 20,000 beds since the beginning of the Conservative tenure in government. And the effect of that is more and more workload shifting or being dumped on GPs outside of hospital. We have a rising workload in terms of population getting older, more complex care. So there's a toxic combination of factors which is driving doctors out of general practice earlier than they might have wanted to. And also we've had younger doctors put off joining general practice because of all the pressures and the bureaucracy that come with a lot of the changes that have been forced upon us.
I've got a couple of facts here. Apparently there are now 27,627 fully qualified full-time GPs in England, down from more than 28,000 this time last year. So that's quite a drop in 1 year, and almost 2,000 fewer than in 2015. I mean, is it? I mean, the doctors are threatening to go out and strike now because they don't earn enough. A lot of people might think that they do, but is it something to do with pay and conditions?
Yeah, I think it's a combination of things. Pay is certainly a factor. The workload is another factor. Dealing with a system that, unfortunately, due to government changes, has become dysfunctional. So that job satisfaction has also eroded. So there are multiple factors. And, you know, it comes at a point where we've endured the pandemic, where workload has been extremely high. Unfortunately, the government stood down general practice at the beginning of the pandemic, which has also given a reputational blow to general practice. So, you know, a lot of the papers have been very critical of general practice not being available, which is a misrepresentation of the facts. So you have a more disgruntled patient
Is it
population.
though, Bob? Is it a misrepresentation of the facts? We get lots and lots of calls from people saying they cannot get to see their GP for love nor money. I mean, I'm sure it's a bit better now, but there used to be, you know, signs, no entry, and you know, on their surgeries. I mean, it doesn't seem to me to be a misrepresentation of the facts that people couldn't get to see their GPs.
Well, let me give you a specific misrepresentation. There was a study, I can't remember who commissioned it, but was saying that there was a reduction in GP hours, the number of hours that GPs will work. This was presented in the Telegraph as GPs only wanting to work part-time. But if you drill down into the detail, in fact, their hours of work for a week, typical week, went down from, I believe it was 39 hours to 37 hours. Now, that, for most people, is still full-time work. In terms of access, you are right. There are some doctors who, you know, reduced access face-to-face, and as a consequence, there was a built-up of unmet patient need, and I'm afraid they are struggling to catch up. So elements of the profession shot themselves in the foot by blindly following government advice, and we can all, you know, discuss forever the government's track record on handling the pandemic, squandering billions, 37 billion, on a wasteful test and trace system and lockdowns which failed to arrest the progress of the pandemic. So we are in a situation being scapegoated by government via elements of the press for a system that has been deliberately run down by consecutive governments.
Do you support the call for potentially the call for a strike by the BMA amid a claim for a 30% pay rise? Demanding a 30% pay rise seems to me to be almost grotesque.
Let me tell you what the pay rise is doing. The pay rise is saying, make up for our loss in income that we have suffered over a decade. This is not an increase on pay that has been going up naturally. This is restoring us back to 2010 levels.
The average GP earns over £100,000 a year. A lot of people would say, you know, you could do without a pay rise, so that's enough to get by on, isn't it?
Yeah, so I don't think the dispute is about GP pay. The dispute is about junior doctor and hospital doctor pay, which has been suppressed for over a decade. If you remember back to 2016, there was a junior doctor strike. And the reason for that strike is their terms and conditions and their contracts were trashed. They had redefining of weekend working as routine work. Their out of hours work, their antisocial hours working was downgraded to normal hours rates of pay, and they lost protections. In fact, during the dispute, they had whistleblowing protection removed from them for a while. So the conditions of employment for doctors and nurses in the NHS has significantly deteriorated, but nobody is highlighting that. And doctors are being presented as greedy and self-serving. Ultimately, if you don't reward doctors and don't treat them well, they will leave the profession and the patients suffer in the end. That's where we're at.
Fair enough, Bob, but if you demand 30% pay rises, it doesn't
Pay
go
restoration.
It's a
Pay restoration.
It's a pay rise, and it's not a good look. But I take your point. Thank you very much. Pay rise. Dr. Bob Gill there, GP and producer of the great NHS Heist. They're not demanding more money. They are demanding a pay restoration. What the hell does that mean? But good to talk to Bob there. His other points were well taken.